I wasn't expecting the applause, so thank you. Thank you all for having me. My name's Chris Marks, Assistant Director at UAlbany. My colleague, Paul LaJudas, isn't going to be joining us today. But we are going to do a presentation about college essay writing. So we'll go over some of the basics of the college essay, everything from really top-level stuff, and then kind of drilling down into some common questions, ideas for writing your essay, even some topic sentences to essays that we've seen in the past. Before we get started, can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure. Yes? Okay. All right. Okay, so the first thing that we want to talk about is just why admissions is asking for an essay. Especially now, you're submitting so many different things when you submit the application. All those materials, you might be submitting letters of recommendation, you have all your grades, you have your transcripts, maybe you're submitting test scores, maybe you're not, depending on what schools you're applying to and what their requirements are. So why are we still asking you to produce an essay as well? Really the essay is your opportunity in the college application to personalize your application. Everything else that you're submitting might be about you, but it doesn't really give you a chance to use your voice. There's parts of the college application, let's say you're submitting the common application, and it'll ask you, what are you involved in, in school, maybe sports, clubs, activities outside school, things like that can help you personalize the application a little bit more than just what classes you're taking or the general demographic information about you. But the essay is really that opportunity for you to take some time to tell the college admissions counselor that's going to be reading your application a little bit about you, kind of what you want them to know. From our perspective, there's definitely that piece, so it helps us get to know you more than we would without the essay. But it also lets us gain an understanding of your writing ability, maybe your writing style, kind of how you think, process information, more than we might have been able to get from a standardized test score or just your transcript by itself. Having that essay can help us kind of paint that fuller picture. And many schools, including UAlbany, when they look at your college application, are kind of doing that holistic review where we want to look at everything, not just your transcripts. We want to look at that essay as well, just try to learn as much about the student as we can. There's that whole list of things there, learn about your hopes, dreams, passions, fears, ambitions, experience, and personality. And that list is so long because there's really so much you can do with a college essay. More things that are just on that list, but these are all different lenses that you can think of your college essay through when you're deciding what you want to write about. So just starting off with some really basic stuff. The first thing there, make sure you type the document in English. Make sure you use a legible font. That can be very important. Kind of think legible, but also maybe professional. So some of those kind of default fonts that come up when you open Microsoft Word, some of the fonts that you're used to submitting like papers in now, nothing crazy that's going to be difficult to read or end up so huge that it takes up a ton of the page, things like that. You want to make sure you're incorporating kind of regular margins, so those default margins like you would be used to when you're submitting a paper for like English class, history class, no super wide, no crazy narrow, so things are getting cut off. Avoid kind of unfamiliar expressions, like it says jargon, so make sure you're kind of writing in that professional academic style. We don't want it to be so academic, we'll say, that kind of lose your voice in there. But you want to make sure you're kind of balancing using your voice and make sure you're writing in that professional academic way so it can be a good reflection of your college application. Next thing, it says it 3 times just because it's so important, proofreading. Especially now, you got all these tools that can help like spell check if you're writing it in Word, all these different tools that can help you check for spelling and grammar. It's amazing, and it happens to me as well, that even when you sort of run an essay through all that, you look it over again, and there's still going to be mistakes. There's still, for everyone, going to be some issues that you're going to have to correct because spelling grammar check doesn't necessarily know what you're trying to say. It might change something, to be grammatically correct, but it could be grammatically correct because you made, an error somewhere else, and when you read through it, you catch that. one of the biggest things for proofreading that you can do, it sounds silly, but reading it out loud to a friend is even better. Reading it out loud to yourself, just by yourself, if you're not comfortable reading it to someone else or in front of a group can be really good too. You catch way more when you're reading it out loud. I'm sure your teachers have told you this, but when you're just reading it in your head going through really fast, your brain will skip over certain words and mistakes because you know what you were trying to say. So when you're reading it to yourself, that's what's going to sort of play in your mind. But when you're reading it out loud, you're going to catch it way more often, and it can just save you from having some mistakes that you wouldn't otherwise have had in there. And that brings me to the next point, asking for that outside judgment. It can be really helpful. I know, as well, some of you might have the college essay, as something that you could work on in class. Others maybe not, but either way, getting that outside judgment, whether it being a teacher, a friend, a parent, can be really helpful, especially if it's someone that knows you well, or maybe has gone through the process before. If you have a sibling, for example, that might be in college now, and they just did this recently, that can be a really helpful person to read over your college essay. Lengthwise, it says up there, there's no hard and fast rule about like an exact word count, exact page lengths for college essay, but that kind of 2 double-spaced pages, that 250 to 500 words, kind of 1 to 2 double-spaced pages is what you're really looking for. So it's not, it's not a ton of space, so you have to be really thoughtful about what you're putting in there. But really anything in that range is what I consider normal. You don't want to go too much beyond that, and at a certain point, the Common Application will actually say, no more words. You wrote as much as you're allowed to write. So it will cut you off at a certain point, but just kind of in your mind, that's a good range there. Final thing, really important at the bottom. So for your kind of generic college essay, if you're filling out the Common Application, that's the same for everyone. I know there might be different questions that different schools will ask later, but that essay is going to be generic for everyone. So let's say you're applying to UAlbany, you really want to go to UAlbany, that's great. You're applying to more schools in your college essay, you don't want to write all about how you'd be a great fit at UAlbany, because UAlbany will see that and be like, oh, that's nice. Maybe they only applied to the University at Albany, but if you're applying to those other schools, they're going to see that in there and be like, this student did not realize that the essay is the same for all these schools. So just make sure it's generic in that sense. And as it says on there, some colleges will want answers to maybe supplemental questions, supplemental essays that are specific to that school. That's when you want to personalize it a little more, or customize it rather, for the school that's asking you that question. This is just the generic college essay that's going to be sent to all the schools. Okay, so a little bit about topic selection. This is something that we get asked all the time. What should my college essay be about? And it's one of the hardest questions to answer because the real answer to it is so broad, and that's that it really depends on you, the student, your own experiences, what you're comfortable writing about, things like that can be different for everyone. There's some similarities that we see, but it really can be different for every student. So that's something that you kind of have to think about and decide what you want to write about. But there are some kind of general parameters that you can use to kind of help you with that topic selection and make it a little bit easier. So the first thing, keep it simple. So we talked about 250 to 500 words just about is not a super long essay. So you want to make sure you're not going to talk about something so complicated that needs so much exposition. You need to explain in such detail that you just can't do it in the length of the college essay. So that's just something to keep in mind. Consider how it reflects on you. Obviously, this is part of your application, so you want to make sure you're writing about something that's going to portray you in a positive light, not a negative light, whether that be personally, academically, what have you. Be mindful of your audience. Kind of fits right in with that previous point, but the person reading it is considering your application for admissions. The person reading it also doesn't know you. They've never met you before. So keep that in mind as well. There might be some things that you think, oh, well, this person will definitely know this. I can just go right into talking about this other thing because my teachers know me. And that's who I'm used to writing essays for, let's say. But the college admissions counselor reading it has never met you, so just make sure you keep that in mind. And the next 2 points kind of go together as well, being that just kind of be careful, what is left unsaid, managing difficult topics. It really just all fits into making sure you're portraying yourself in that positive light, personally, academically, whatever you're writing that essay about when you're going through trying to decide. So these are just some common essay topics, kind of in the sense of what might be a question that's asked. Now, for the generic college essay, it's generic in the sense that there's no specific question you're going to ask. However, some of these questions, not at UAlbany, but just in other colleges generally, can be kind of common, like supplemental questions that they might ask you to provide if you have to write like an extra essay. So this one, for example, share a background, identity, interest, or talent that is meaningful to you, and then kind of go through on the side and define some of those key words, because if you read it, it's asking you kind of choose one, because like I said, we don't have a lot of room. So a background could be a cultural background, an identity, maybe a gender identity, interest, sports, if you play on a sports team, if you're passionate about sports, that's followed you throughout high school, that's a really common one. And a talent could be singing, dancing, music, anything like that. Talent could be sports. You have a lot of room here. Another one could be recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure, and what you learned. This is something that we certainly see a lot, and for good reason. It can definitely tell us a lot about a student, about their experiences, and give you an opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit about you. That could be losing an important sports game. That's something that if you're an athlete, I'm sure you've experienced at least once, maybe not, hopefully not, but probably at least once, being rejected from a job, maybe a leadership position at school or in a club that you weren't expecting, or maybe something more serious like navigating a family crisis. These are all things that we've seen essays about, really good essays, and it all just depends on your own experiences. If you don't play sports, you're not going to write about losing a sports game. Another one could be reflecting on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. Could be questioning a family belief. Maybe it's a school policy that you don't agree with, and you voice that you don't agree with it. You want to write about why. It could be confronting an authority figure in your life about something that you didn't agree with. But this is another opportunity where you could use the essay to kind of explain, what the idea was that you challenged, why, and kind of what your logic is for that argument. And it can be one where it can allow the admissions counselor to really get to see kind of how you reason through problems, how you think about kind of going through that logical progression of forming an argument, which is something that's super important for really whatever you're going to major in, whether it be more paper heavy or not paper heavy. Kind of forming those arguments and presenting them is something that you're going to do in college all the time. Could be writing about something or someone, something someone did that made you unexpectedly thankful or happy. Be a friend helping you in a time of need. Could be an act of kindness from a stranger. Could be a teacher going above and beyond for you. I'm sure you all have examples like that of really positive experiences with your teachers. These are all things that you could choose to write about if this is a topic that you wanted to think about. You could be discussing an accomplishment, event, or realization that led to growth and new understanding. This could be the end of a relationship, moving to a new place, maybe switching schools. Some of you might have switched schools. You know how challenging that can be. Unexpected changes that you've had to adapt to. Could be something like a canceled trip. Could be something a little more serious like a health issue. These are really all things, as I'm going through this, that we've certainly read, like multiple essays that both kind of fall under the overarching idea of that topic and into each of those breakdowns. Could be describing a topic, idea, or concept that fascinates you so much that you lose track of time. Could be something like being on a roller coaster is fantastic. It could be a TV show, book, or movie franchise that you really like, you really identify with. That last one is a good one that I always like to point out just because you kind of underscores that the college essay doesn't always have to be something like super serious. It can be if that's what you want to write about and what you think kind of illustrates illustrates what you want to portray best. But it could be something like a lot more light, like this is the movie franchise I really like. This is why I love Star Wars. Maybe you want to do engineering, and that's what got you into wanting to do that at an early age. There's a ton of stuff you can do with this. And it could just be a topic of your choice. There doesn't always have to be a prompt. It doesn't have to fall under one of those ideas. Like I said, especially for just the general college essay, a lot of times there's not a prompt. Could be something about an important person that made an impact on you. That is a really common one. People writing about a friend, maybe grandparents, a risk you took that impacted you, that maybe created some growth, that you were like happy afterwards that you did, but it made you really nervous. Maybe the college process can kind of be something that you think of in that way. But it could also be maybe auditioning for a school play. It's you don't like public speaking, but it's something you're always interested in. You just wanted to go try and do it, and you did. It's kind of how that kind of changed how you thought about things afterwards. All right, so we had a lot of different topics there. And there's a lot of different opening sentences that you can use to open a college essay depending on what the topic is. These are all different opening sentences that we've had. And you can see there's not really a rhyme or reason, linking these together, because each essay that went with it is about something totally different. And that's something we want to underscore here, is that you can choose any of those topics, and you get all these different topic sentences out of it. The topic sentence is something that's really important when you're writing the essay, because it's obviously the first thing the counselor's going to read, kind of that first impression of you, of your essay, after reading kind of the beginning of your application. So you want to make sure, especially for this part, that it's something that you feel really comfortable with, something that's really strong. I know there's some more generic ones there. There's some that you guys are like, what? Somebody started their college essay with that, but yeah. And these can all be great essays. Okay, so talked a little bit about kind of the topic for the essay, kind of how you want to think about choosing the topic for that essay. But now we want to get into a little bit questions that we consider when reading the essay. So when I say we, I mean the college admissions counselor that's reading your essay. So the first thing, what is the initial reaction? And that's kind of that first sentence plays into that. What was your initial reaction reading the essay? If maybe you didn't proofread it, the initial reaction would be like, wow, that essay was interesting, but there's just all these grammatical errors all throughout. I'm disappointed that this student maybe didn't proofread their essay, didn't read it over, because we all want your essay to be good when we're reading it. No college admissions counselor is starting to read a student's essay and it's like, oh, I hope this isn't good, or like, I hope this is bad, because no one wants to read a bad essay. We're human as well, so if you get an essay that's a little more interesting, engaging, not full of mistakes, that's more enjoyable for us to read. So that's what we're hoping for each time we start an application. So that initial reaction is important. Did it make the applicant come to life is another one. What we mean by that really is just, did we get a better sense of you after reading the essay? Because as I said at the beginning, a lot of those other application materials, you can't really personalize. And when you can't really personalize it, it's more difficult to make that applicant come to life for the person reading the application. And the essay is that opportunity to do that. So when we read the essay, we feel like, wow, we really know something more about this student. We really get a better sense of this student after reading this essay. Were the ideas presented clearly? So this kind of plays more into kind of that organizational academic writing piece. Like, oh, is this a student as well as us learning something about them? Do they seem to know how to write an essay? Do they know how to present the ideas? Do they know how to make an argument, if maybe that's what they're writing about in their essay? Did they do that clearly? Was I having to read the essay more than once? So I'm like, wait, what are they talking about? Like, they were talking about this thing, and now they're talking about this totally different thing. How did those link together? Present your ideas clearly. Someone doesn't need to do that. What are the students' passions, motivations, or challenges? This can be a little bit more dependent on what you're writing about. But if you're writing about something that kind of falls into one of those categories, that's something that can be very helpful, particularly if maybe you're applying for a major that's a little more selective. Some schools, depending on where you're applying, might have programs that you have to be like directly admitted to, let's say, or you can't just apply to with your regular application. There's kind of an extra step in there. So maybe that's an opportunity where it's like, wow, that our engineering program is super selective, and this student had a great essay about why engineering is their passion and why they're motivated to pursue engineering at our school. And finally, would you like to see the student on your campus? That's the biggest thing. And obviously that has to do with more than the essay. You know, the biggest thing is going to be the academics. Do we think this student has the academic profile to succeed here? But also, kind of just more generally, you read this great essay about the student. They're interested in all these different things. They want to do, they want to do clubs. They want to do activities. And you're like, wow, this is a student that would have a really positive impact on our campus, and we'd love to have at UAlbany, let's say. And that's not something I would have necessarily known to that degree without reading the essay. Okay, so finally some closing thoughts here, and then we're going to have an opportunity for questions as well. But the first one is really important because I know the college essay for a lot of you is probably something that you're really nervous about, been thinking about, freaking out about maybe, like, oh, the essay, I'm like putting it off. I don't even want to do it because I'm so nervous about doing this essay. And it is just one part of the college application. So everything I said before about taking it seriously, proofreading, it being important, these are all true. This doesn't make it less true. But it is one piece of your application. And as I said, UAlbany and pretty much, I don't want to say every school, but most every school that I'm aware of their process, which is quite a few, kind of take that holistic review of the student. That's why they want the essay. If they didn't want to take that holistic review, they wouldn't ask you for that. They'd be like, give us your transcript. We don't want anything else. That's certainly not UAlbany, and that's not most institutions. They're going to consider the essay as one part, kind of in the context of everything else they receive. So in the context of your transcript, which is going to have, obviously your grades, but what classes you took, how did that relate to the major that you're choosing? All this stuff, the activities on your actual common application. A lot of times the essay might be about sports. We see that you were, captain of the basketball team on the application. So these two things go together. They're considered holistically. The essay question is not intended to trick you. That's an important one just because it can be easy going through this process, whether it be the common application essay or maybe a supplemental essay that a school is asking for. You're like trying to figure out the question, like, oh, what's the catch here? Like, this seems like a really simple question, but there's got to be something that they're trying to do, something they're trying to do to trick me. I want to figure it out. I want to figure out this question. And really, in these cases, there's no trick. There's nothing. We're trying to get you to figure out what the question. We're just trying to give you, a prompt, an opportunity to share with us what you would like to share with us. Humor helps. Like I said, admissions counselors read a lot of essays. Your essay does not have to be funny if it's about a serious issue. But if it is, it can be entertaining to the admissions counselor as they're reading it. That is never a bad thing, but certainly not a requirement. The essay should tell you who you are so that it distinguishes you from other applicants. This is kind of getting back to the beginning of the presentation where I talked about the essay is your opportunity to tell the admissions counselor kind of more about you, what motivates you, what do you want that school or that counselor to know about you when you're considering an application. That is something that I will often say to students when they're asking about the essay. What do you think is something that you want to tell the counselor that tells them, hey, this student would be a good fit for our campus. The decision to admit or deny does not hinge on the essay. Kind of touched on this, but I just want to say it again. That is not the end-all, be-all of the application. The essay is important, but by and large, one of the biggest things that colleges are looking for is when they're trying to make an admissions decision is, will this student be successful on our campus? Will they accomplish their goal, which is graduating, hopefully in 4 years with that bachelor's degree if you're applying to a 4-year institution? And by admitting this student, are we putting them in a position to succeed? That's the biggest thing, and that's why the decision to admit or deny does not hinge solely on the essay. Showing that you're willing to think, so maybe consider some difficult issues, as I said, showing the counselor that you're able to kind of unpack ideas or arguments, go through it in your head and have those ideas that are in your head maybe in an organized fashion get on the page in an organized fashion, seeing that translate to the essay, that you're able to write in that more academic way. And we love reading the essays and learning more about you. So that's another thing too. Like when you're going through it, you're writing the essay. It's not, admissions counselors do read a lot of essays, but one of the reasons that we do what we do is because we like reading those essays. We like learning about the students. It really helps when you're going through, an application. Kind of having that break to read a good essay is always great. And I'm just gonna close that with once again saying make sure you proofread. As I said, that's like such an easy one that you'd be surprised how many people clearly don't. And it's something that you can all do. Take away from this right now. That's like, hey, whatever I do, I'm going to read it out loud. I'm going to look it over. I'm not just going to put it through spell check and be like, all right, that's done. I don't need to read it over because I put it through. No, like still read it over, read it out loud. As we say, happy writing. Thank you. And